The following stages and procedures are for spinal board management. Stage 1 is locating the spinal board. Prior to extrication from a vehicle, a spinal board will be required to be located for the casualty to be placed on. The spinal board could be inserted behind a casualty in the seated position. Considerable neck and spinal care must be taken during the placement of the spinal board. Stage 2 is manoeuvring the casualty. A minimum of one rescuer is required to support the head and spine of the casualty prior to any movement. A second rescuer is required to have the spinal board ready to be located. The first rescuer, with the aid of an additional rescuer, will slightly incline or manoeuvre the casualty, maintaining neutral spinal alignment at all times. The second rescuer will put the spinal board into place carefully and hold firmly. The casualty can then be reclined and/or lowered to meet the surface of the spinal board. At this point, additional rescue techniques may need to be conducted to complete the appropriate extrication pathway. For example, cutting the back of the seat. Again, it is critical the casualty is held securely during this process so that movement to the spinal system is minimized. To relocate the casualty completely onto the spinal board, additional crew members must be brought in to spread the manual lifting workload. Evenly space the crew members along both sides of the spinal board as soon as practicable. The crew member at the head of the casualty must take control of verbally calling when to slide the casualty up or down and how far. For example, ready to move 300 mm. Move. All crew members will follow that verbal call. Stage 3 is transferring the casualty. Always make a final assessment of the casualty or casualties prior to removing them from the vehicle. Ensure an egress pathway is clear. Consider the possibility of an unseen penetration or snag, vehicle instability, the need for sharps protection, all of which may interrupt the final release. Check with the ambulance paramedics and/or medical practitioners before moving the casualty or casualties. The crew member at the head of the casualty must clearly advise the team of people lifting the spinal board where the final destination is and how far it is away from the vehicle. Hazards to be aware of are: the casualty is too heavy for rescuers, exposure to biohazards, cross-contamination of bodily fluids, exposure to sharp edges, vehicle instability. Control measures to employ are: additional crew members brought in to reduce the total lift requirement. Ensure correct PPC and/or PPE is worn throughout the task. Ensure sharps management is completed prior to the removal of the casualty. Ensure correct stabilisation is put in place prior to the removal of the casualty.